There's a lot of damn FPS games out there, from Call of Duty campaigns to Titanfall to Borderlands. There's a lot of variety in the FPS genre, and it has mostly continued to evolve over the decades. However, this absolute saturation within this genre of gaming, in addition to the dominance of particular gaming franchises within the FPS genre, has made it so innovation and change within the genre itself has almost become stagnant, as the hardened formula established over the years has remained the dominant way to develop such games. Just look around for good FPS campaigns, of which I really enjoy, and sometimes you can have trouble finding a game both cohesive in its shooting mechanics while being something different from the norm that isn't just a Battlefield or COD ripoff. My search for a fun and engaging FPS campaign led me to a game I'd never heard anything about, Bulletstorm. Bulletstorm is the best FPS I bet most of you haven't played, but I highly recommend this game to all of you, and will discuss as to why this game deserves a chance. Bulletstorm is a fairly old game, dating back almost 13 years now, but the game graphically has held up pretty well. Of course, the graphical fidelity and textures of the game aren't going to hold up extremely well to today's standards, but for a game released at the start of the 2010s, it looks pretty good, and the game perfectly fits the absolute craziness of the gameplay and story at hand. It's not anything that will blow your mind, but the visual effects that occur while killing enemies, blowing things up, and generally traversing across the variety of locations the game brings you through in its relatively short runtime are quite well done, and adds to the pizzazz of the game's overall tone and feel. Bulletstorm is definitely one of the most gamey games I've ever played, and if that doesn't make sense to you, it essentially means that the game itself flows accordingly with many of the tropes typically associated with games as a whole, and it doesn't feel like a reinvention of the wheel or a reenactment of a grand cinema film. Rather, it just feels like a pure game that's pure purpose is to allow you to delve into an adrenaline-filled adventure that screams fun at every point and venture. What shines the most through Bulletstorm's runtime is never its presentational value or even its story that I'll briefly discuss without spoilers later in the video, but rather it's the game's eccentrically fun focus. Everything about the game's core gameplay loop and mechanics is focused entirely on ensuring the player is through an adventure that never stops its fun factor, that never ceases to allow you to enjoy it thoroughly throughout its entire runtime. Bulletstorm's gameplay never intended to reinvent the wheel of FPS mechanics, nor did it attempt to add a mechanically proficient movement system that would differentiate it from the crowds of games that it was surrounded by, those usually with much greater budgets and marketing prowess. But what Bulletstorm does do is throw you into a non-stop marathon of shooting a variable set of enemies over and over again, chucking and throwing in various additions in the form of different weapons and tools to ensure that the gameplay is continuously enjoyable, that its engagement levels are kept consistent throughout your entire playthrough. Bulletstorm provides you with 8 different weapons, each with their own distinct uses and creativity, in order for you to meld them together in a variety of different scenarios to create a truly fulfilling gaming experience. There's some wacky weapons in here, of which add to the game's over-the-top nature, feeling completely like an action flick in the form of a video game. If you've ever watched an action flick yourself, I think that would be the best way to envision Bulletstorm itself, as it conclusively tucks you into a story that is mostly about gunning and running. Some weapons such as the bouncer shoot explosive bouncing cannonballs, while other weapons such as the flail gun shoot bowlers weighted by grenades. Every weapon in the game also has an alternate fire mode that further changes the dynamic combat within the game, turning every weapon into a completely different beast, which goes a long way to keep the gameplay continuously fun and enjoyable. But what really made the game fun for me was the melee attacks, with this mainly seen through the leash that you carry, which pulls enemies towards you, and the abundance of kicking that will happen as you play the game and deal with those waves of enemies. But this is most encapsulated in the game's skill shot mechanic, of which is nothing revolutionary in itself, but when paired into the game's already over-the-top gameplay mechanics and loop, you've got yourself a system of gameplay that is never dull at any moment, always bringing you into a state of pure adrenaline. The skill shot mechanic occurs when you launch an enemy into the air with your whip, or kick or slide into an enemy, causing the game to enter a slow motion state, allowing you to perform a skill shot, utilizing your arsenal of weapons to pull off some absolutely crazy antics, of which spices up the gameplay loop on so many levels. For me, the weapon variety, the over-the-top visual effects of blood and gore splashing all over the screen, in addition to the satisfaction garnered from the variety of melee attacks and combinations you have throughout the game, truly defines this game and sets it apart from other FPS campaigns and games. It's nothing revolutionary in its gameplay department, but it never needed to be. The game takes all of the best aspects of an FPS campaign and combines this all into one conclusive package, where the absolute wackiness and craziness of the game itself is the lore of the gameplay mechanics and of the game in its entirety. I'll super quickly touch upon the basics of the game's story, of course without any spoilers, as I want you to completely enjoy the game's prowess without having anything spoiled. Bulletstorm isn't defined by its story, and I think that's obvious by the game's merits in terms of its gameplay, as really the story only serves to be a backdrop of the game's antics and the set pieces the game serves you with. Bulletstorm is set in the 26th century, following the story of Grayson Hunt, who is a space pirate and former Black Ops soldier who gets shot down on a war-torn planet while working to exact his revenge on his former commander, who tricked him and his battalion into committing war crimes and other atrocities. Bulletstorm's story is a simple one, definitely one indicative of an action flick, as I said earlier in the video, as you'll be traversing through a variety of landscapes and environments in order to fulfill your quest for revenge. And honestly, the story isn't anything memorable, but is crucial in complementing the overall gameplay of Bulletstorm, which is the main reason you'd even want to play the game in the first place. I highly recommend this game, especially waiting for a sale, as it isn't too long of a game. If you enjoyed this video, consider dropping a like and subbing for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.